First paragraph. Kind of long. We got a lot going on. What's our argument there, do you think? What are we trying to prove? Right? That's how you know you have an argument. You're trying to prove something.
That cancel culture is stupid.
That's one thing they say. They say more than that, right?
Yeah.
How much evidence do we have? How many quotations do we have? I think 3. Is that right? 3 quotations.
3, yeah.
And one of them's even kind of long. One of them is basically 3 lines, which is pretty long for a quotation. Okay, so what are we doing with each one of those quotations? One of them pretty literally says, like, cancel culture is stupid. That's like one of the guy's points, right? The other 2 quotations don't really do that, though, right? What are those doing?
One is talking about how he had been posting dumb stuff anyways.
It's been like a trend for a long time.
Yeah. They've already been fired.
Yeah. So they seem to agree with what happened, but feel like it took too long, I guess.
Yeah, that happens.
Sure. And then what's the other guy say? That's that long one in the middle.
He was talking about pretty much that he wanted the cancel culture for this situation to be overblown, but when he went back and looked at recent
Tweets.
text or tweets,
Yeah.
he couldn't really. He couldn't defend him.
He felt like he couldn't defend him for what he'd said. So I want this to be like ridiculous,
Right.
but I feel like it's not, sort of thing. Okay. So that's what all of those quotations say. Our job, if we're the student, is to somehow make an argument out of all of them, right? I think we do, but we first got to pinpoint what that is. We're trying to tie all those together under the umbrella of one larger argument. What do you guys think that is? It is in there. And it's even in the place where I keep telling you guys it's probably going to be. Does anyone happen to recall where that is?
The beginning.
No. That's where you want it to be eventually. Look, I tell you guys a lot of things. I know I do. This one across the board is true. When you start writing, you do not know what you want to say. You have general ideas. Very, very general most of the time. But as you write, you figure it out. You do, if you write enough. And typically, if you're going to have an argument, which is not always guaranteed, I will grant you, but if you're going to have one, usually it's going to be near the end of your paragraph. Because your brain has sort of chewed on all that stuff, and right at the end, you kind of spit something out. You're like, oh, this thing. So do me a favor real quick. Very end of this paragraph, last couple sentences, go hunting for an argument for me. It is there. You guys see anything? I'll even help you a little more. Last 2 sentences. What's up? Go ahead.
My bad.
You're good, man.
He says pretty much he believes people can change and shouldn't be punished for
Yeah.
what they did a few years ago.
Yeah, he's like that's apparently what this you sound like an idiot when you say somebody's Twitter handle, but this Jack Has Crackers guy, he's saying that's his opinion, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Sentence after that, what do we say?
In general, fans are definitely polarized on whether they agree or disagree with consequences.
Is that an argument?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I talked about this, I believe it was last time. There are 2 questions you have to ask yourself for every argumentative paper, okay? That's for this class, that's damn sure for the next one. It's for any class you are required to make an argument, okay? The first question is, are you making one? Our very last sentence of this paragraph makes an argument, which probably indicates, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you it does indicate here, that's the only place we make an argument, which is a problem. But we do have one, okay? So step 1, we got it. Step 2, is it an argument that's worth making? That's trickier. But I'm gonna ask you, do we need to spend time proving? That's the best way I can think to put it to you. Do we need to spend a good bit of time proving that people are polarized when it comes to discussing this guy's tweets?
I mean, he could, or they could put like an example of what he might be talking about.
Of his tweets?
Yeah.
They could. What do we have right now? We have 3 quotations that do what? Each one does one particular thing. Each one of these quotations, what do we use them for?
One talks about how someone can change.
Yeah?
The other talks about like how you cannot defend them anymore.
Right.
And
And the other one says you've been doing this for a long time.
yeah.
What do we say about those quotations? This is an important question. What do we, as the student here, what do we say about those quotations? Anything more than what Jardel just said? It's not a trick question, I promise you.
Like, what do we think about it?
No. On the page, do we say anything more than what you just said about those 3 quotations?
Wait.
He's been doing this for a while. I want to defend him, but I can't. And, cancel culture student. Do we say anything other than those 3 ideas?
Not really.
No. That's a problem. When you quote, I'll say 95% of the time, know you're in a bad spot when you say this. An example of. That is simply you going, look, here's the thing, here's this guy saying this thing, I'm out. That's it. That's all you've done. That's not analysis. And by the way, if whatever idea you're trying to prove only requires you going, see? Well, then it's probably not an idea that's worth proving, right? The example I like to give all the time. If I approached you on the street before you came in, you're on the sidewalk there and it's like, hold on guys, we need to look both ways before you cross the street. Look, I have all this data, I have all these horrific pictures of people that didn't look both ways. You would justifiably go, I'm good man, I get it. Yeah, you don't need to, right? That's banal. The point is made as soon as I say it. Conversely, you saw my son earlier, I have to remind him because he's 5 and insane. I would have to explain. He would ask, why do we cross both ways? Well, you see those cars? They're going pretty fast, huh? He'd be like, oh yeah. I would have to break down the evidence for him. It's not banal to him, right? So if it requires proof, that's what I'm saying. If it requires explanation, you know you have an actual argument. If all it takes is you going, look at it, that's probably a clear indicator either number 1, it does require explanation and you're just not providing it, or number 2, it's banal. In this case, Yeah, I would imagine people are polarized about this guy's tweets. Because it's 2021. We know that. It's not terribly difficult. So let's move beyond that. Now, a good way to do that is actually what you said a couple minutes ago, which is, I'll break it down for you this way. I understand, first of all, because I don't want to just bury the student, I understand why we pulled these tweets. But what I would ask you to do, because again, all of you are going to have something like this kicking around in your heads, rather than give me kind of a long paragraph, this is single spaced, remember, like that's probably a page, double spaced, that paragraph. I would rather you read that stuff, kind of internalize it, and then rather than try to make an argument with most of that, because it's just not very helpful, where might that information help you, rather than a body paragraph, you think? Thinking about what people are saying about this guy. Where do we need that information?
When you try to make it, when you start your argument process.
At the top of the introduction.
Right.
Good. In your summary, if people are polarized, if you want to write a sentence or two on some people feel this way, other people feel this way, that's where that goes, right? Because you're breaking down what the conversation looks like. That's fine. 3 to 5 sentences, top of your paper, get that out of the way, okay? So, unfortunately, we pretty much delete all of this right now. Second paragraph. This one's a little better. It's a little shorter, it's a little better, it has its own problems. What's our argument here, you guys think? You go back to skimming if you need to. Actually, while you guys are doing that, I hate calling on people when I'm going to do it. Keenan. Jardel already made the point that ideally we would have an argument in the very first sentence. That's where you want to have it. But then I made the point, you guys never do that, at least not to begin with, right? So my pop quiz for you, unfortunately. Very first sentence in this second paragraph, along with fans, Sawyer's castmates, that thing. Is that an argument, do you think? Remember, an argument requires proof. Is this something we have to prove, we have to explain, convince somebody of? This first sentence.
I think it can be an argument.
Why do you say that?
Because you could get proof of what his castmates say about the
Sure,
situation.
sure. And we provide that proof. But once you read what those people have said, does it require further explanation? Does it require, when I say proof, that's what I mean. Does it require analysis to make that point?
No.
No. Again, think back to my example. If I stopped you outside this building, I could make the argument that you should look both ways before you cross the street, but it would not require explanation. You'd be like, I got it, man. I'm like 20. I understand. Right? It's banal. Or in this case, it's just summary. He's telling us a thing that happened. Sawyer's castmates did do this. That's an observation. It's not argument. Okay? And again, even if you're not sure, when you get to the evidence, you know it's not an argument because he's doing the same thing he did in the first paragraph. He's just going, look at it. See? Right? That's not an argument. However, much like the first paragraph, we do come to a kind of an argument in this paragraph. I'm gonna ask you guys, where do you think that argument might take place?
At the end.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Good. Let's go to the end of the paragraph. Last couple sentences. Look through there real quick. What are we maybe trying to argue here?
I think pretty much free speech. So it says, so
I mean, put it into a sentence if you could. I mean, for it, wrapped up in the notion of free speech, I suppose, but we could be a little more precise.
So pretty much like if the people
Who worked on the show?
Worked with the show.
Yeah.
Disagreed with the CW, then pretty much they could have like problems with them. The CW could have problems.
So this guy is suggesting that we don't necessarily get the cast members' real thoughts. Now my question is, first of all, that is an argument. Okay, that is an argument. More on that in a minute. Do we use the evidence to make that point? Let's go back and look at the evidence. We have two quotations here, right?
Right.
One was from the guy that runs the show. He said, "This morning, many of you learned that Hartley Sawyer will not be returning for season 7 of The Flash. Concerning his social media tweets, they broke my heart and made me mad as hell, and they're indicative of the larger problem in our country." Massive quotation. What do we do with it? What do we say about it? Somebody other than Jardel. He's been kind of carrying the load today. This is an easy question, I promise you. If you want to know what somebody says about a quotation, where should you probably look? Where should you probably look, guys? Come on now.
Right.
Huh?
Right after.
Right after. All right. Jardel helped us out with that one. So let's go to the end of the quotation, and then let's read that next sentence. And then somebody, please, for the love of whatever God you pray to, tell me what we say about this quotation. I'll wait.
He said he's disappointed in Will Sawyer.
Okay. Disappointed. And it hurt him. Do we say anything else about that quotation?
No.
No. How do you know?
Cause it just say how much it hurts him, and then to see what happened, then he starts with another cast.
Then we move to the next quotation, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't ever do that. But if you have one sentence after a quotation, you had better crush it in terms of analysis. So that means we got to figure this out. Did this student, in fact, crush their analysis? They claim that Wallace, this guy, is disappointed and it hurt him to see these tweets. Go read that quotation again real quick. Is that an argument based upon that quotation? Huh?
That it hurt him and that he hates to see these tweets.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really an argument.
Why not?
Because it's just pointing out that he just hates to see it.
Because that's what the guy said. Because that's what he said. Right?
Yeah.
We have a different word for that. That's paraphrase. Summary, if you like. We get this huge 4-line quotation, way too long, by the way. And then we follow it up with one sentence that's like, that guy's really disappointed. It's like, I fucking know, dude, because I can read. Right? So we've not made an argument with that quotation. I'm not saying we can't, but I am saying we haven't. Let's go to the next quotation. This is from the Star, apparently. He said, "Shocked, saddened, and angry when I saw the tweets, words matter." Now, our student points out this is a much shorter tweet, which is true. Gets his point across in very few words, okay? Do we say anything else about this quotation? No. What do we say instead? We start talking about something related, but
He talked about the difference with the cast.
we spin off into an argument maybe related to those quotations, but we never talk about the quotations themselves. We paraphrase them and we move on.
How long should we spend talking about our quotes, or
Do I now?
how long should we spend sentences talking?
The rule of thumb I was given is that minimum 60 to 65% of your paragraph should be analysis. Analysis, by the way, is basically all the stuff we spend time in class doing where I have you go, all right, let's get a quotation up here, let's focus on details, let's break down like that whole thing. That's analysis. And we just spent about 5 to 10 minutes talking about how we have none of it in this paragraph, right? We have some quotations that I think trimmed could offer some possibilities, but we say nothing about them. We paraphrase them. If all you are doing at the end of the day is reading a quotation and then putting it into your own words and then moving on, you're not doing anything with it, okay? That's a big problem. Now, for the sake of just organizing a little bit, and he submitted a PDF, so the formatting is going to be weird for us. What we're saying is all of this, no argument. We already talked about how all of this, no argument. That's a problem. But we do have a kind of an argument here. And what was it again? You said this like a minute ago, Jardo. What was our argument in this last section? You said it had something to do with free speech.
Oh, the one above it, it was pretty much talking about like if the people that were with
The show.
the show
Yeah.
had different views or said anything differently from the CW, they could have like problems with them.
Yeah, they can't necessarily tell us what they really think,
Right.
right? And look, that's plausible. That's certainly plausible, you know? This will be the hardest question I've asked today, but I promise you it's not that difficult. What is the fundamental issue with this argument as we have it right now? There's a big problem. I admit, the argument we have at the end of this paragraph is plausible. But there's a problem with it. What's the problem with this argument right now? There's a couple ways. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
You're good.
I feel like people already know that there's just some things you can't say when somebody's like. oh,
Apparently Hartley Sawyer didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I just say, like, I feel like a lot of people know. I don't know that everybody knows.
yeah, I think he just exercises free speech.
Sure. I mean, we're gonna come to that. We gotta table that discussion for a second. But just with these sentences we've highlighted, there's a big problem. It's with one particular word in these sentences. I'll help you out even more. Because our real argument, right, is in this last sentence. Last two sentences, I suppose. There's a big problem with one word in these two sentences. Really messes with our argument. It might help you think about how argument works. This is something you have to prove, right? Something you have to explain, you have to speak to. You need evidence. But this word makes proving this idea tricky at best. Any thoughts on what that word might be? It's a little word.
If.
Oh, look at you. What's the problem with that word, do you think?
Because they're just saying, like, if it's pretty much like maybe.
It's a big old maybe.
Yeah.
It's a hypothetical. If any number of things happen, then this other thing would be the case. That's how if works. But that's the entire, like, that starts the sentence that begins our argument. That is the basis grammatically of our argument. If. I don't know if there's any Falcon fans in the room. If Devontae Freeman picks up the blitz in the Super Bowl, Falcons have a ring. Spoilers, he didn't. He missed the block, strip sack. Anyway, painful memory. But that's how if works. But we are not dealing in hypotheticals. We're dealing in the real world. We require proof. I'm not saying, again, that we can't necessarily speak to this idea. I think it's plausible. But what I am saying is right now we have not. We don't use any of the quotations we pull. And when we finally get to an argument, we just go, you know what, if than this. And it's like, well, fine, dude.
So if it's like not, we should stay away from using it to start off the season.
Absolutely. If you start your argument, for sure. Like, I'll give you another example. If my students took better notes, I think they would do better on papers. But I'm going to need proof for that. I would have to go back to a magical time when students took notes, which I don't know if that ever existed. It's going to be hard to find evidence for that, right? It's just a feeling I have in my heart. That's an opinion. If you don't have evidence, that's not an argument, that's an opinion. Can't prove those. Okay, so we got all that out of the way, and look, it's a bit of a downer to start your day. I appreciate that, right? I just told you that the 2 paragraphs this student turned in, for the most part, I mean, this first one will help us come up with a concise summary to start our paper, okay? And then we kind of do nothing in this next one, okay? But we seem to have some thoughts on this. Here's what I want you to do now. The other link in that email, I told you, links to an article. Pretty short. You can read this in 5 minutes. If you would please, read that article. We're going to talk about it real quick. Sweet. All right. So, to begin with, I don't know, because I don't have their works cited, I don't know that this is necessarily one of the articles they're pulling from, right? But it seems likely. It's got a lot of the quotations that we're using, right? We got that one from the showrunner, we got that one from the Star. More on that in a second. What else do we get? I think there's useful information in this article. Something we could maybe pull for our paper. What might that be?
Like, probably the last, I guess, paragraph, they were giving examples of, like, people that have been canceled.
I mean, I understand the impulse, but how would we use that?
Like, these examples.
Of what? We just had a discussion about that word even, example.
I mean, we'd have to give an example.
Of what? I'm honestly asking, I'm not trying to be an idiot.
Yeah. Are we talking about the article or what we were reading?
We're talking about the article.
Okay, well, he gave like 4. He talked about the canceled Roseanne revival after Star and executive producer.
Yeah. So we get examples here at the end of all these other people who, I guess, have recently been canceled. What would be the problem in providing those examples in our paper, though?
I think like those examples are like just back to back to back like that. I guess.
Sure. Like for the purposes of this article, it's helping us understand maybe the current climate or people that have done something similar to this guy, apparently, right? But when it comes to our paper, I'm going to go ahead and tell you can't do that. But I'm curious if anyone can help me with why we can't provide examples of other people being canceled. Why would that be an issue?
It's not related to what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
First of all, you only have like 3 to 4 pages, and I know for some of you that feels like a bit of a death sentence. That's not actually that long. It's not that much time. You just don't have time to talk about these other people, okay? Especially if at the end of the day, it's not going to amount to much more than, look, here's somebody else. Here's somebody, we're running back into that same problem, okay? That's not what we're here to do. It can help you think about, again, the current climate maybe, but it's probably not going to help you in your paper. So let's move beyond that. What's something else we could use? When you talk about pulling something for a paper, usually that's going to be what? What kind of material do we usually put it in our paper? Talk about it.
Like phrase sentences.
Yeah, we have a word for that.
What's it called? It is the word just like
Quotations?
yeah, quotation. Yeah. Just
You know,
like-
phrase sentences.
Yeah.
Yes. My wife once forgot the word for mud. She referred to it as dirt water. I just looked at her and was like,
Yeah, it happens.
you talking about mud right now, though? Yeah, but I don't let her forget it. It's fun for me. Okay, quotations. Now we talked about already how we have a couple that the student already has. Jury may or may not still be out on those. We'll talk about those in a second. But what other quotations do we get that we could maybe think about?
The quotes that he said.
The fucking tweets, man! Our student wrote 2 body paragraphs on this guy apparently saying some things that were awful, a lot of people had problems with, he got fired, all this stuff. And we haven't seen any of them. Feels like a swing and a miss to me, you know? Let's look at those. Let's think about what might be said about them in the context of our paper, right? In this article, they're a little down. I think. Well, actually, no, I've lost them. Where the hell are they? They're in here.
The third paragraph from the bottom.
Well, a little. It's the one, the paragraph that begins, among the tweets users surfaced. That's it. So we get 3 tweets. The only thing keeping me, there's that one, and then enjoyed a secret boob viewing at an audition today, and then date rape myself so I don't have to masturbate, which is a hell of a sentence. Well, let's think about those. If we were to pull one for a paper, I'm gonna let you guys choose. Which one would you pull, do you think? Which one do you want? Any of them can work, I think.
Like Sawyer,
Yeah.
I guess the only thing keeping me from doing mildly racist tweets is no.
Okay.
That one.
Yeah, the Al Sharpton one. That was a little long.
I don't know.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to think of like, all right, so that quotation, the only thing keeping me from doing mildly racist tweets is the knowledge that Al Sharpton would never stop complaining about me. That one. We're in this student's shoes, and we're entertaining the possibility of including this quotation in a paragraph. The first thing we got to figure out is why we're pulling it. Number one, because you can do this very first thing with a quotation. Why? What do you think this Garrett Hartley guy, or what Hartley Sawyer, whatever the fuck his name? Who's Garrett Hartley? That's somebody else. Anyway, weird ass name. What is this guy trying to do with that tweet? What is he trying to say? Do you think?
Is that he wants to he wants to say low-key racist stuff.
Uh-huh.
But it's like he feels like he's getting held back by the Al Sharpton dude.
By Al Sharpton,
Yeah.
specifically. Okay, so what you just highlighted for us, notice how you did a really smart thing, whether or not you meant to. Jardel just trimmed kind of the fat off of both ends of that tweet, right? If we were to quote this, we don't really need the only thing keeping me from, we don't need any of that. We can paraphrase that or whatever, okay? And we also, may or may not need, would never stop complaining about me. We can say that. What matters in this tweet is the Al Sharpton reference and the mildly racist tweets. That's the language that matters. We can dig into that. Let's think about it. So, mildly racist, which is a fun phrase, and Al Sharpton. Does anybody know who Al Sharpton is?
No.
Aw. Nobody? I'm trying to think of something you can commit. Has anybody ever heard of Jesse Jackson? He's kind of on a similar level in terms of civil rights. He's on the news now, or at least he was recently. I don't know if he still is. But he's a black leader. He was a reverend. I don't know if he still is, but he kind of started there, and he's a black voice right? And he had a very public platform for a very long time. Yeah, he still may. I don't watch TV, just to be honest with you. I haven't watched TV in a long time. But he's, for most people, maybe people older than you guys, okay? When they see Al Sharpton, he has all those associations that come with him, right? We're like, oh, that guy stands for these things, right? It's kind of how he's using it there. Why bring him up in light of this, do you think? Or, another question that's related but different, why put this way?
I don't know, because I guess he just didn't want to be like straight up just called a racist, so he said mildly racist, but I guess.
Okay. Why doesn't he want to be straight up racist,
I
do you
mean,
think?
he has a lot to lose. I mean, this is the first time you ever hearing about this actor, so it's like.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, here's another, like, this was from 2012. I don't know what he had to lose back then.
I don't even know.
Yeah, probably less than he ended up losing in like 2019 or whenever this happened. But why say mildly racist? Why not just say racist? Is that not the same idea? What's different here?
To make it sound less bad.
Why is it less bad? Pretend like I'm an idiot. Break it down for me.
I guess because like if you just straight up racist, you'll just. I mean, there's just some things that you'll say and you know it's like racist, and then he can be around the bush when he wants it to be racist, but you can't really tell. So it's like that could be racist, or maybe that's not how he meant it.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're describing to me, I would describe almost as like diluted racism. Do you guys know what diluted means? Like, if you have a Coke at a restaurant and then you don't drink it for a little while and the ice melts, you go to drink it and like, that doesn't taste like Coke. It's because it's diluted, it's watered down. Okay? Kind of feels like he's trying to say, I'm not trying to like throw out the N-word, I'm not trying to do that, but I'll, you know, a little. Does that make enough sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do that? Why announce the fact here that he wants to do that, apparently?
That's what I'm thinking. I don't even know.
Well, that thinking about that, I think allows us to get into an argument, right? He says this publicly. He does not, to be fair, say here, I think you can kind of argue maybe he does, but he doesn't really say a mildly racist thing, perhaps. But he indicates he would like to. Why do that? There's two pretty strong reasons I can think of. I'm interested to hear if you guys have anything. I would like to be mildly racist. Why put it like that, do you think? Like if I came in one day and I was like, man, I'd like to be mildly racist sometimes, but I just feel like I'd lose my fucking job, you know? Like why do that?
I guess so he can like show that side of him, like on a social media platform.
Okay. Now, we understand one piece of that argument, which is, hang on. One piece of that argument is pretty obvious, which is it's social media. You want to connect with your fans, you want to connect with like-minded individuals. Maybe there's this huge undercurrent of people that want to say mildly racist stuff. We get that. We get that. What's the other reason for announcing it that way, putting it that way on social media, do you think?
Might have been a joke.
It's absolutely a joke, I think. Especially when you take it with the other. Look, I'm not saying you can't be offended by that stuff, right? Although the last one, well, there's a reason why you could be offended, but especially the last tweet in that paragraph is pretty clearly a joke. Gross, but it's a joke, okay? But that brings us to another point, which is, now I think we're getting a little clearer picture of the conversation that's being had. It's not as simple as, look, people are polarized, because again, we know that. They're polarized about a fundamental issue or a fundamental question, and this is true for all of you, okay? What's the question here? Why does he get in trouble? I'm kind of gesturing at you because you're the last one to talk, but what gets him into trouble?
It's because people can't tell like if he's actually like being serious
Some of the time, for sure. Like in the one that we've pulled, you could just read that by itself and go, this guy just wants to say mildly racist shit. Like, what the fuck? Who
Probably
the?
just like wasted or something.
Do I know?
I say he probably was like wasted when he said that.
Quite possibly. But, especially when you look at some of these other ones, two things become apparent. One is, again, some of this is fairly offensive, mildly offensive. You could, to borrow his language. The other thing that's pretty clear, I think, is that he's trying to joke. Okay? Now the question is, what are we saying about jokes here? That's what this conversation is about, I think. They reference Kevin Hart at the end of the article. They reference Roseanne. All those people were joking. Kevin Hart is a comedian. It's actually his job. But he told some jokes years ago that were, mildly homophobic, to keep borrowing this guy's language.
Yeah, I think like if we were living years ago and somebody said this, it wouldn't bother. But nowadays,
Standards have changed.
yeah.
Sure, for sure.
That's why I wasn't big in 2012 because you never heard anything about.
Yeah. No, I mean 2012 is when I was in college.
Yeah, there's probably some situations, but I never heard anything like what
Yeah.
we hear now.
Well, so what are we perhaps saying? Because one thing we're saying about this tweet is that people found it offensive, right? But again, we're not going to argue that because we know that. What we have to argue, the fact that they found it offensive tells us what? About us as a people, a society, a culture. In this case, I think it helps us figure out what our standards are. Okay? And I think it, in this example, comes back to jokes. What are we saying about our standards as it relates to jokes, do you think? I'll make it real simple.
You pretty much gotta say it's a joke.
Well, I mean, let's be real now. Even if he started each one of these with only joking, but
Yeah,
would it have gone about the same?
probably.
Probably. Why? What we're basically saying is you can't tell jokes like this.
Yeah, he just.
But why?
He just has it.
Why can't you tell jokes like this? As you pointed out, this is a recent phenomenon. When he originally made them, nobody seemed to care. When Kevin Hart originally made them, nobody seemed to care. So we're saying something definitive about us now. Why can't you make these jokes now, publicly, do you think?
Because people get offended over it.
But why? We gotta find words for this.
Because of like most of these jokes he's made is like it's like a touchy subject now. It's
Like what? What are those subjects?
Like the date rape joke that he made. That's actually the women's movements. People are talking about that as like.
Maybe people who have been date raped before?
Yeah, and they're like speaking out about that. It's like, well, this is really bad. You have a celebrity saying this.
What might they argue joking about material like that does? Like, according to them, what's the problem?
That if you joke about it, you don't take it serious. You don't see it as a problem.
When it's a serious issue.
Yeah.
Is that fair? By the way, none of us are saying we agree or disagree. Like, this is the material we have, right? That seems to be a fundamental point in this conversation, right? You cannot joke about certain things because those certain things are serious, should be taken seriously. And by joking about them, these folks would sort of interject that you're making it seem like they're not a big deal, right? And of course that runs the risk of that stuff just like continuing to happen. So that's where we're starting. This is the start to our argument. And again, just to reiterate real quick, in your papers, you are not saying whether or not you find it offensive. I'll be honest with you, okay? I'm a white male. Historically and generally speaking, the world has gone pretty well for people that look like me, okay? This is how it's been. I don't find these tweets offensive. I don't. You could also argue they have nothing to do with me. There's nothing in them for me personally to be offended by, right? I think that highlights a more specific way to talk about this. We say it minimizes. Do you guys know what that means? Makes it seem less important. Makes it seem like a smaller deal. Okay? That's what we're saying. And we were talking about the subject matter. So, date rape, racism, mild racism, I suppose. Secret boob viewing. What's the problem with that tweet? Who's that going to offend?
Women?
Why?
Because it's creepy.
Treat me like an idiot. Why is it creepy?
Because he's looking at someone else's body.
Without their knowledge.
Yeah.
Which implies without their what? We have a big C word that you can say in class. You're checking out somebody's body without their knowledge, you also don't have their
Consent.
good.
I thought there was like a viewing, like a private. I thought that's what he's talking about.
He says secret.
Okay, I thought that was like something like a private viewing or something.
No.
That's just.
What would that even look like?
I mean, I heard some weird stuff. I mean, I feel
Okay,
like
what-
it probably is.
The way I read that tweet is he's basically saying he was like checking somebody out while he was at an audition. Because he's an actor as well, right? And like he just kind of like sort of thing, right? Is what we're talking about, which is creepy. But we're saying
Oh,
you can't joke about being mildly racist. You can't joke about consent. You can't joke about date rape. Even if you're talking about date raping yourself, right? Why? It minimizes the subject matter. But why else? I think we can get more specific. I told you already. Guys that look like me, which by the way, is kind of Garrett Hartley, right? You see that picture of him. I get confused all the time. Well, not confused, but like people tell me, hey, you look like this famous white guy with brown hair. And I'm like, yeah, I get that a lot. I do. We all kind of look the same. Yeah, I know. So what else could we start to argue gets minimized by humor like this? I don't think it's just the subject matter. Understand, on one level you could argue, Garrett Hartley, God, who is that? I'm going to have to look that up in a minute, it's going to bug me. I think it's a punter. It is a punter. Anyway, too much football's in my head. The point. He wants to be mildly racist. You could argue he doesn't think consent is a big deal. So much so that you could argue he doesn't think date rape is a super big deal. He's going to joke about those things. Who gets offended by that material, specifically?
probably most, for the date raping, would probably be most women. I mean, there's,
Mostly women.
and, I mean, they'll be men.
For sure,
I'm not offended by this, like. I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
But I know it's like, you shouldn't say that.
No, exactly. But again, like that's I think that's an important distinction to make. Like in your own head. Like you're kind of being honest with yourself about your perspective, I think. On one level, those tweets don't really affect you. You know what I'm saying? But here again, that brings me to I think the point that we're kind of getting to. What else gets minimized? It's not just the subject matter. If he's publicly claiming that the things he's joking about aren't a big deal, why does that potentially matter? We're arguing that he's arguing these things don't matter so much. Why is that a big deal? Apparently it's a big enough deal to get him fired. So
It's just because you're like in two different environments. Like maybe back then it didn't matter as much, but now it's just.
for sure, no, we're gonna come to that if we have time. I don't know that we will. That's an important question too, but we gotta deal with this one first. I'll try to make it as simple as I can. Who primarily, because there's always exceptions, who primarily gets offended by these tweets? You got one saying he wants to be mildly racist, and then two where he jokes about like consent and date rape. You could even argue perhaps these people would read that stuff as a kind of an attack.
Oh, so like
Why?
women and like black people.
Really, anybody that's not white.
Right, pretty much, just like a colored person.
Sure. So, what I'm kind of wondering is, on the one hand, again, they're read as offensive because they minimize certain subjects, right? But I think you could continue that argument and say it minimizes certain perspectives, right? The logic being, look, Hartley Sawyer doesn't see such a problem with this stuff in 2012 because he's less affected by it, right? But that doesn't mean other people aren't much more affected by that stuff. And so he's minimizing their perspectives with those jokes. Does that make sense? That's the problem people have. Hey man, you don't think this shit is serious, but I sure as hell do, right? That's what that offense looks like. And we can talk more about that in a paragraph, which we don't have time to do right now. But notice too, how this is crazy more specific, just as a starting point, than people are polarized. But yeah, we know. You gotta work with the evidence, you have to. The other question we had, I think we maybe have time to sort of do this. You referenced a couple times the change in standards, which is true. Several of you have cases like this where these tweets are from 2012. I think maybe one was from 2013. That's a long time ago, to be honest with you. Right? How old were you guys in 2012? Goddamn. 11. You couldn't even like stay out after dark. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a long time. One of the tweets we read in the original paper was like, people change. Over certain spans of time, people like grow up, people's opinion, you know what I'm saying? Like, which is true. But it is interesting how, and again, we do this, so this is worth thinking about in this paper. We, in the past couple years especially, seem to have a real desire to take our standards and apply them to the past, right? Like most egregiously, you'll see people doing this. Like, I don't remember if they did or not, but I know famously people now want to like take down Abraham Lincoln statues and shit like this because like he wasn't the biggest fan of black people, right? It's like, you know, he was born in the 19th century, like that. For his time, he was crazy progressive, but it's just a different time. Like, he's not, you know what I'm saying? He didn't grow up like we grew up. He didn't have the same standards. But what's interesting too is we do the same thing, and you would think it wouldn't matter as much. But it's kind of wild when you're forced to appreciate the fact that in 2021, our standards, even 7, 8 years ago, what have you, you could start to argue have like changed pretty significantly, you know? And again, we're not quite arguing that because that's somewhat obvious, but the question is, why do we take our standards and apply them to previous times, right? Why do we want to do that? Why do we feel like we can or should? You know what I'm saying? And that's a hard question, but I think that's something they gotta consider in this paper. If I think somebody in another class is writing about Kevin Hart, they're gonna have the same kind of question, right? Why? Why do we do that? Why are we compelled to do that? Like, we want to do that for some reason as a culture, but why? One, maybe we have, and again, we have very little time, but we're gonna try. In this same article, and this was actually in their paper, but we're gonna look at the article because this is what we have now. We get current day responses, okay? So another way to think about the quotations I'm talking about, these are people with at least similar standards to what we have. I'm not saying everybody is the same, okay? But these are people responding in the current day. So they have current day perspectives. And they respond with those standards to what this guy said years ago, right? That's this Wallace dude and the Star. So there, it's the two paragraphs actually right above the one we were just looking at. So the very first one says showrunner Wallace, that guy. I already told you that quotation is way too long. We cannot pull that entire quotation. That is bananas. But reading over that real quick, just like we did with this guy's tweets, is there any language we could focus on, you think? I'll help you out. That first sentence. This morning, many of you learned that Hartley Sawyer will not be returning for season 7 of The Flash. Is there any language in that sentence we could dig into? Because we quoted it in our original paper, so that would tell me it's useful in some way. Is there any significant language there? Is there anything that if you overheard on the street, it might grab your attention?
That he won't be coming back.
Are you talking about the language there or the idea?
I guess like the idea because of the.
And why do we quote? Is it for ideas?
For language.
For language.
Right.
If you want me to have the idea that he won't be coming back, do you know how you could tell me that?
From like different reports or something.
How do you let me know this guy's not coming back if I need that information? Lily,
Just say he's not.
you
coming.
just say it. You aren't gonna quote anybody. I'll believe you. You don't need a quotation. This is the big, I understand why they do it in high school. I do. But the difference between the papers we write in a book report is this. You do not owe me a quotation to prove that something that happened, happened. If I'm not sure, I'll look that shit up because I'm an adult. Just tell me. This guy got canned. Now we're going to make an argument out of it. Okay? You do not need to prove things that exist. You prove arguments. So that first sentence, all of that, which again we quoted in our paper, is useless. It's background information that you can bring up if you need it, but as a quotation, it's useless. Okay? Next sentence. Concerning his social media tweets, they broke my heart and made me mad as hell, and they're indicative of the larger problem in our country. Apparently he said more than that, but that's what we have. So those last two sentences in that tweet, is there any language that is doing more than is what is on the page? Means more than specifically what they say? Or is anything said in an interesting way? Does it have a tone about it that might help us?
I mean, I guess when you said they're indicative of the larger problem in our country.
Okay.
So, like, I'm pretty sure, like, if I'm right about indicative, it's like opposite, right? It's like,
What do
we're
you
not
mean?
exactly talking about it's opposite from the problem that we're having in our country.
What do you mean?
Like the definition of indicative.
Oh, no, that means indicates.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's saying this guy's original tweets point to a larger problem in our country, is what he's saying. Okay. Yes. But specifically, you seem to highlight this question of a larger problem.
Right.
I think that's important language. Especially, again, because we're trying to think about, here in the last couple minutes we have, what our standards are now. And I think that's part of it. We as a culture have sort of sat down and said, we got big problems we need to think about. So that works for me, okay? Any other language? I think there's a little bit more. We could, how does he talk about that larger problem? What's his opinion of maybe facing material like that?
His heart was broken
That's a certain kind of a tone, isn't it? That's pretty intense. Okay. Now we already started with, again, if we're thinking about the standards, this is beginning to identify what those standards are basically standing against, right? And God help us, we got no kind of time, but we're going to try. What do you think that, given what the original tweet said and what we talked about, okay, and then given this guy's reaction to them, what do you guys think this larger problem is he's talking about? I think that we'd have to get that in our paragraph.
Racism.
Yes. Can we get a little more, like what, we can be more specific is what I'm saying. Think back to what everything we just said about the guy's tweets. It's not just,
Like,
go ahead.
I mean, racism is like, it's not like a small thing, it's like a big thing. And
Racism.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
he was making it like mildly.
Good, good. So that's exactly what we said in our previous paragraph. He is suggesting that it shouldn't be minimized. Do you see what I'm saying? In his language, he says, no, motherfucker, it's a big problem. And you're minimizing it. That's the standard we're using. You follow me? Okay. Racism is, and again, it's not just that, it's misogyny. These are worth defending. More specifically, shouldn't be minimized, right? The large problem he's referencing is that a lot of people, according to his language, look at those issues and basically say, well, we mostly figure those out, it's fine. Kind of what he's getting at, right? Okay. That's a big piece to our standards that we're talking about here in 2021. They get applied retroactively to this guy's tweets. Now, I keep saying this, but God, it's worrying me. It's 10:40. With the last little bit of time we have, I would say the most important language we've talked about all day. Heartbroken and mad as hell. Now, those are two, on one level, very different ideas, but I think on another level, they're kind of similar. How are they different? I think that'll be easier. Has anybody in here ever been heartbroken?
Yeah. I mean, like, technically, if you're mad, you don't have to be heartbroken. You're just like,
They seem like two different ends of a spectrum, right? Being heartbroken, by the way, like, it's been a while for me, but like, well, no, actually my cat died about a month ago. That was pretty hard. I had him since I was your age.
oh wow.
I know. It was, I don't cry. I cried a little bit. It was fucking hard. It really was. You feel it in your stomach. You know what I'm saying? It fucking hurts. Honestly, just talking about it right now, I kind of like had to think about it. It's hard, man. When you lose somebody. It's heartbroken. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, mad as hell. Has anybody ever been mad as hell? To put it that way, like I get angry. I got a problem. I'm trying to work on it. I got a short fuse. I don't get mad as hell very often. I don't think. Hope not. Why put it that way, do you think?
I guess to add like more intensity to the subject.
Okay. So again, on the one hand, phrasing it this way supports that idea, right? He's sort of saying not only are these our standards, but when you violate those standards, we take them so seriously, these are the reactions, right? Okay. Is there, go ahead.
I don't believe he's probably mad as hell, but I feel like he's trying to get it out there that it's unacceptable.
Well, that's interesting. That's the other, like, this is super intense language. And this is what I'm always getting at when I say we quote from language, not ideas. If you paraphrase this in your own words, you would say, he reacted badly. He had a strong opinion. That doesn't convey the same, right? Why use such intense language? You just said you don't actually think he was heartbroken. You don't actually think he was mad as hell. Why not?
I mean, unless he's black, which I really don't think he is. This-
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, that's why. I feel like it'd be a bigger story if he was black.
And,
Oh, the showrunner?
yeah, the person.
I mean, maybe a little, because
Yeah.
like this guy's boss is black. I mean, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But suppose he is. I mean,
Now, if that's the case, then I could probably understand that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I guess we could look him up to confirm, but we're not doing that. We have no time.
right.
But your original thought, like, why do you think it's unlikely, okay, that he was heartbroken or mad as hell?
I feel like if he just said, I'm just mad, they just would be like, oh,
Or like disappointed? 'Cause I think he says that at one point.
He doesn't care.
Well, he cares, but there's a
doesn't
level
really
to it.
care. He's like, he just sees it, probably like a small issue like Harley does.
Yeah. Well, and again, part of the full picture is this was 7-8 years ago. Like that isn't, like if it had just happened, like if you find out one of your coworkers yesterday tweeted some crazy racist shit, you would go in the next day being like, Derek's a different sort of dude than I thought. You know, like you would feel. Now conversely, if you find out 7-8 years ago Derek said some things he shouldn't have said, you would still feel a certain kind of way, but I think it's fair to point out you wouldn't feel as strongly, I would think. Well, it's interesting to me. We always use this language. We always do. And your first impulse, and you're kind of cynical, which I'm with you there on most things. You kind of doubted the sincerity of it, right? I think that's fair. And with the no time that we have, I'm not going to write it because we're out of time. If we're going to argue this guy is maybe being insincere, why do you think he would do that? By the way, you could argue he's being sincere. He really means it. That's possible.
I mean, because obviously if you argue that he is, you just have words to say he is, like, he just has the words to show, but you don't really have evidence to make it clear that he's actually sincere.
Well,
He's just saying that.
part of the thing we don't have time to talk about is the other guy's tweet, the star, I guess, it's similarly intense, and I guarantee that guy's white, because I've seen pictures of him, because he's the Flash. And to borrow the earlier argument we were making, we're not saying you can't feel a certain kind of way about information you interact with, but it just seems unlikely that this guy, again, would be heartbroken, mad as hell about this stuff. So with the last bit of class that we have, what might we start to think about argument-wise? Why is he saying it like that, do you think? Why be arguably insincere in that way, do you think?
So he can like get his emotions across to the people that to his viewers like this is not okay, and this is how I feel about it.
Well, but to be fair, you're kind of arguing he's misrepresenting his emotions in service of a larger idea. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So one argument we're making, because that's all we had time for, is that we as a society, you can sit, dog, you're good. You're good, you can sit.
Oh no, I was looking for my AirPods because we hear a lot.
Oh shit, we can do that too. But we're kind of suggesting we consider our standards so important, such a big deal, right? That's what he says in the tweet. That we feel like it's acceptable to misrepresent your response to violating those standards. That's one argument. There could be others, but that's one argument you can make out of that tweet. We're basically saying the ends justify the means. You could lie a little bit in service of something that matters more. That's what we're saying about our standards, according to that argument. I think that's plausible. It kind of sucks when you put it like that, but I think it's fair. And again, the fact that you guys haven't packed up completely astounds me. I appreciate it. Anything you do has to work like that. You have to dig into these quotations. I know I keep saying it, but I keep seeing work from you guys where you're not doing it. Don't just point at something. Dig into the quotations for language. Come up with an argument. Even if it's a bad one, I promise you, if it's an argument, you're gonna do way better. All right, I'll let you guys go. We have homework. I don't remember. Rough draft. Do you want to turn it in? Go ahead and run, because God help me, I've held you for a couple minutes. I never do that.